Welcome back to Before Stuff Hits the Fan. We're your hosts, Jayda.
And I'm Boaz. And today we're talking about something that honestly changes the way you see schools once you understand it.
So let's just jump right into it. I feel like we know that there's this inconsistency in education. We see a student struggling, we know they're behind, and historically we've basically said, come back when you failed harder, and then we tweak it.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it. It's called the wait to fail approach, which is a discrepancy model. And it was built into how students qualified for support.
It sounds kind of wild, like when you say it out loud. So today we're going to be diving into the framework designed to replace that mindset, which is response to intervention, also known as RTI.
So, what is RTI really?
Good question.
First things first, RTI is not a program you can just buy. It's a process, and it works like this: deliver high quality instruction, monitor student progress, adjust based on how they respond, hence the response to intervention.
So it's kind of like the scientific model for teaching. You just try something, you measure it, and if it doesn't work, you pivot, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
correct model.
That makes sense. So if we look at it clearly and just analyze some articles that we have an article written by Cara Butler, and then we have our handbook, the Supporting Schools Inclusive Handbook for Resource Teachers in Manitoba Schools. And the way we see it and the way it's described is that RTI works through a 3-tier pyramid. So first at the bottom, we have tier 1, which is our universal support. We are teaching everyday classroom instruction, high quality instruction, that core instruction, and differentiating it for everybody. And research shows us that strong tier 1 instruction should support about like the whole class, like 80 to 90% of our students.
And here's the big mindset shift. If 40% of your class is failing, that's not a student problem.
What is it then?
That's a tier 1 problem.
Fair enough.
Exactly. So based on that data, we would then move up the pyramid into tier 2, which is targeted support.
Okay, so that's for that 10 to 15% who aren't responding to tier 1. Tier 2 is basically, we're thinking small reading groups. We're bringing children into little groups and trying to wean out the ones that really need that support. We think about 30-minute phonics interventions or bringing in a literacy specialist just to help with the small group intervention. So these kids are not failing yet, but the data shows that they're slipping.
Okay, I think I understand. And for that tip of the pyramid, we have tier 3, which is intensive support. This is about 1 to 5% of the students, highly individualized. Often it's done in one-on-one type of structures, and it may involve modified programming or specialist support. But here's the difference from the old model. You don't wait until grade 4 to act. You intervene as soon as the data shows. So that's, to put into perspective, you would be waiting for about 3 to 4 years before you can intervene. And you can guess by that time it's maybe a little too late.
Okay, so this old model that you're talking about, the discrepancy model or the wait to fail model, this was before RTI was even introduced. And in the article presented by, I think it's Desiree Heather Narvey, she dives a little deeper into this area. So basically, in order for students to qualify support, as you mentioned earlier, a student had to show a large gap between their IQ and their achievement progress. So like you said, if a grade 1 student was reading below grade level, but the gap wasn't big enough, they'd get no support.
And you're waiting until grade 3 or 4 before actually giving that help. Isn't that insane?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
So they've internalized failure at that point. They think they're, for lack of better words, stupid. They might hate school. And that's the heart of the wait for it, the wait to fail problem.
The wait to fail problem. So how is RTI then being implemented in Canadian schools and replacing that old model? Well, thankfully, pretty much all Canadian divisions, including Manitoba, RTI has been implemented for quite a while now. And it shows up through universal screening, which is done like 3 times a year: fall, winter, spring. And then we have the collaborative class reviews where the main teacher, the principal, the resource teacher, they all get together. They look at the entire class, map out all the strengths and the needs of the entire group, and then they allocate resources and bring them into the classroom. And this is based on the class dynamic and not just individual diagnosis. And I just feel like this process is better bringing in the resources rather than pulling 10 kids out, because it's preventative and it kind of reduces um, labeling.
Yeah, I really like the way you put that. I remember a couple years ago, I was in my practicum block and we would pull kids out once or twice a week for about 15 minutes and they would do some literacy supports, right? And then they'd be brought back in after that time, joining the normal class and stuff would kind of go on, right? And it has its positives, it has its negatives, but that short chunk of time where maybe the kids in the classroom were doing some reading. At the same time, those other kids were also pulled out and they would go and do some reading with just that, again, that support. So one key tool used in the screening process is CBM. Well, you're probably wondering what CBM is.
Yeah, I
Wondering
am.
too?
I don't know.
It's curriculum-based measurement. Let's break it down. Let's do a CBM line graph tracker example.
Okay.
Why don't you use your imagination?
Okay, I'm using
Close
it.
your eyes,
Close my eyes.
right?
Yep.
CBM is short, timed assessments that track skill growth. For
Okay.
example, a 1 minute oral reading fluency test,
Mm-hmm.
count how many correct words they get in this minute. You don't just test once, you test multiple times, you test repeatedly,
Okay.
right? You plot these points on a line graph tracker. So you imagine maybe in September, they got 35 words per minute. October came around, they were a rock star, they got 38. November, they got 39. So if this expected benchmark is 50, I mean, the goal is 50 by winter, and the growth line is flat, that tells you tier one isn't enough.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, and the beauty of the line graph is that it removes that guessing. Right? You're not just saying feel like they're struggling. And all we all know as teachers, we all have a preferred, whether it's corner of the room where we tend to go towards a lot, certain students that we gravitate towards. This way, you're removing all that and you're looking at just data. You can see the slope of progress. If the line is flat, you adjust instruction. If the line improves after intervention, you stay the course. You know it worked. And that's RTI in action. Now I want you to open your eyes. Let's look at protocol versus problem solving.
Okay.
There's this tension between these types of approaches, right? The protocol approach, again, go back, that's the CBM. If the score is measured in X, then you do the intervention, right? That's the Y. So if X, then Y. Problem solving approach gets you to ask, why is this happening? Now, protocol is efficient. The problem solving model requires collaboration. It's
Mm-hmm.
that deep thinking, you gotta get in there. It's actually essential for educators to use both protocol and problem solving approaches together because it's indicated by Narvi's data that it's actually dangerous to look at data in isolation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody gets that experience, right? At work, you're a number, school, you're a number, right?
Mm.
You can have what we call false positives.
Like if someone just bombs a test and then they're flagged for intervention that they don't even need. So I guess Narvi is just suggesting that protocols are good for standard issues, but we need that deeper problem solving approach so that we can ask those why questions. The problem solving approach is where the deep work really happens. Like our team looks at a struggling student and has to ask those questions. Why? Is it the hearing? Is it the focus? Is it because they moved schools 3 times this year? Or is it, and I don't even want to say this as a teacher, but is it the teaching style?
Yeah, you ever hear that song? It's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me. Sometimes we really gotta look at ourselves, right? We really gotta ask those questions. And the last point is definitely a hard point to swallow for teachers. But Narvi points out that the problem solving approach really aligns with professional learning communities, or as we call in the education community, PLCs.
Mhm.
It's a beautiful acronym.
Yes.
It turns teachers into researchers of their own classroom.
Yeah, and I find myself doing that all the time. I'm not a teacher, I'm also a researcher, a scientist, a cook, a mom, psychologist. I'm everything in that classroom. But something that
Yeah.
we also see in our classes are behavioral issues. And Narvi suggests that academic struggles and behavioral struggles are connected. They're not completely separate. When a student throws a chair or, is using profanity towards a teacher, it's not simply because they want to be defiant. Sometimes it is the case, but a lot of the times it stems from frustration. Like often they're throwing that chair or cursing you out because they can't read, or they can't read because they don't have the self regulation skills to focus. So, like in these cases, we go back to that RTI model, that pyramid, and start incorporating behavioral aspects. So, tier one, teach the expectations to everyone. The entire group knows what's expected for behavior. And then, if that's not working, tier two, you have smaller groups, social skills groups, where you really target certain behavioral issues or struggles that need to be targeted in the class. And then at the tippity top of our pyramid that we love, tier three, the intensive behavioral plans. And that's to really target that. Like we said, I think you said 1 to 5% of students that are really struggling with behaviors. So practically speaking, Boaz, how can we use our RTI in practicum?
Let's make this practical for teacher candidates like ourselves. You might not control school-wide RGI systems yet, right? Remember, it's a framework. This takes, different levels for it to really work, but we all have to be on the same page. But on your part, you can use small group instructions, right? Intentionally, right? Really focusing on a specific quality that you want to engage with. And then you might track 2 or 3 focus students with that simple CBM, those CBM probes, right? And then you create your own mini line graph tracker. And it's very important that you remember, right? This is data, right? This is one part of the equation.
That universal screening.
Exactly. And you adjust instruction based on weekly data, right?
Hmm.
Now it might be a lot, especially as a newer teacher coming in or as a, teacher candidate, but
Oh, yeah.
you gotta give it a shot, right? And you gotta collaborate with resource teachers, right? Instead
Mhm.
of immediately referring out, which in a lot of cases you really can't, right? And you shouldn't, but you have a team, right? This is again, it's a framework. So you have different levels of resources that you need to work with if this is going to be effective.
Right, exactly. And something as simple as just tracking their weekly scores or reading fluency in a Google Doc or graphing your slope like we were talking about with the CBM, that is RTI thinking. So it shifts from they're struggling mindset to what does the data say and how do I adjust to help my student?
Let's take a look at leadership and cultural shifts.
All right.
Narvi emphasizes leadership in this whole collaboration process, right? The principle is actually an essential part of RTI, right? Like I said, it's a framework. So it has different qualities in there. So Narvi calls them the lead. The principle doesn't just take a look at the concept of RTI, implement the policy, and then request data by due date. The principle is also actively learning. They assume the role as an instructional leader, collaborate and communicate with all the teachers at their disposal, right? And provide necessary resources. It's a partnership with the rest of the staff in order to raise student achievement.
Well, that's great. They're just as involved as the teachers enforcing these policies.
Yeah, we're taking a look at these students and understanding that while they're coming in with a lot, they're also giving us a lot, right? We're looking at them as assets rather than liabilities, and we're really looking at how can we work with our strengths.
The other group that is also essential to this process is the student services team.
Yeah, a team who used to be completely isolated from the main teacher
Yeah. The team who used to have their old little office down the hall. In the old expert model or in the discrepancy model, the resource teacher had their office down the hall and you'd send the quote unquote broken kid there. The expert, still using air quotes, would tinker with them and then send them back to the classroom. But like with RTI, it kind of just gets rid of that seclusion. And Narvi states that it's a shift where resource teachers are pushing into the classroom. They're pretty much co-teaching. So they're working side by side with the general teacher.
Yeah, and Narvi looks at leadership. I'm just gonna backtrack there. She looks at it as the most significant factor in student learning, right after teaching itself. So, like we mentioned, if the principal views RTI as just paperwork, the teacher will too, right? So it's that change in implementing it as a framework and not just a series of tasks, right?
Right.
That that being said, it sounds really terrifying for a lot of teachers, right? You're asking someone who's been a king or a queen of their own castle to suddenly open this drawbridge and let another adult critique them.
Yeah. It requires a lot of vulnerability, but the payoff is huge. It breaks that isolation. It's a part of inclusion, and it just shows and it helps the teacher know that they're not struggling alone with a difficult class anymore, and they have a partner to have a second set of eyes on the tier one.
That's just powerful. Give me a moment to just soak that in. That really ties into one particular concept that I love.
What was that?
This idea of constructivism.
Constructivism. I've heard that before, actually.
Yeah. Constructivism in this context especially challenges the idea that a disability is some fixed trait inside a child. It's suggesting that often disability is constructed by the environment.
I see. So, what's like a practical example you can give me for what that means?
Think about this as a student in a wheelchair, right? Like a wheelchair user, right? If a building only has stairs and that student is disabled by, the way the building is set up, right? If
Mm.
you build a ramp, that person is still the same, but that inability disappears altogether.
Okay, so if we applied that in a classroom,
Like if you're looking at a child, they learn best in a school by doing, right? You know the hands-on stuff, but the classroom is 100% lecture based. The environment is constructing a learning disability, right? So if this student is so good at these hands-on stuff and they struggle with like staying in the same space or they can't, stay sitting down for super long lengths of time and you are lecturing the entire time, you're actually the problem. If you change the instruction, if you build that educational ramp,
mm,
the student might flourish.
oh,
And RTI is about building ramps and not fixing legs. I mean, really, really, really consider that all this noise that's coming in is now silenced. And they're actually in a prime headspace and environment to learn.
wow, that's kind of poetic. I love how it's not about fixing the child, it's about fixing the interaction between the child and the school.
Precisely. I mean, wow, couldn't have said that better. And this is the true definition of inclusion.
But let's be real here. It sounds all butterfly and rainbows, and we can do this, we could do that, and support the child, and everything's amazing. But in the Narvi article, she also held focus groups with teachers who were trying to do this, and they were stressed. So, what were some of the roadblocks that we can talk about?
I mean, time. I mean,
We
it's
don't have it.
it's always time. And especially the kind of time which would be put into collaboration.
Right. It's not realistic to do that problem solving deep dive on a student within that 5 minutes between classes. The class review process, like we talked about earlier, the data analysis, the co planning, everything, it takes hours, it takes days, weeks, it takes a long, long time. And teachers are asking, like, when are we going to do this? Do we even have the time to do this? What is the point?
And if the admin doesn't build that time in RTI, it really, really in that environment rather, tripping over my words. It's such a profound day. But if the admin doesn't build that time for RTI to really build and cultivate that framework, it just becomes unpaid overtime. Who wants to work for free? Am I right?
Yeah, not me. That also leads to burnout. And yeah, been there, done that. Another roadblock, though, was the professional development aspect. So some of the teachers were very clear, like those one-shot workshops are useless.
That's a classic. I mean, I was in that just like a couple months ago.
Yeah,
It's
you fell
it's
asleep in that.
it's tough. Yeah, yeah. Don't put my business out there like that.
Nothing changes. They need like a deep, ongoing training on how to differentiate. Like, it's easy for us to sit here and say, differentiate for tier one, but it's really, really, really hard to actually teach a lesson that engages a kid reading 2 grades below reading level and a kid reading 2 grades above at the same time. We should know.
They felt ill-equipped, right? There
Hmm.
was one element of a case study in the source that particularly spoke out to me, right? Is that the immediate need for trained professional support.
Right. This one is subtle, but it's pretty dangerous. Like, even with RTI in place, when a student is really struggling, the teacher's instinct can still be, I need an expert. Take this child to the specialist.
It's a confidence thing, man. Like I'm not trained for this. You're telling yourself you're not good enough, right? You're not trained for this. This is not described in my responsibilities. I mean, yeah.
Exactly. But RTI asks them to take ownership of this and say, this is our student. I need to do this. I need to do the work and I need to support them. And for that to work, the teacher needs to know with absolute certainty that they will be supported by their team. And if they try to keep the student and just struggle alone, they'll go right back to the old refer and displace model.
Yeah. That discrepancy model. Now getting
The chills. Ugh.
there. I mean, it all comes back to trust.
Yeah, it does. Trusting that the system won't let them down.
So let's zoom out. We've looked at the pyramid, the people, the challenges. What's the big takeaway here? Like, what is the meat of the potatoes?
Yep. Well, ultimately, with the documents that we've gone through and examined, it tells us that RTI isn't a program you can just buy. It's a framework for decision making. It's about aligning your resources, your time, your money, the people to the actual needs of the students before they crash. Emphasis on the before, like we're trying to get to them. It's a preventative type of strategy.
Exactly. You hit it right on the head. And for those that are listening, whether you're in education or management, that very precept holds. Okay. Don't wait for the failure to be severe before you act.
Yeah, use the screening, check that data, spot the struggle or the challenge, and when you see it, don't blame the person. Look at the support systems around them and the environment and see what can be done.
Yeah, we're really trying to silence that noise so that the focus is clear. I want to leave everyone with a final thought. Narvi talked about inclusion. It's not just a place where students sit. Just because a kid is physically in the room doesn't mean that they're included.
I've been saying that.
It's a way of thinking and acting that measures every single individual and makes them feel accepted, valued, and safe.
Huge emphasis on the safe aspect.
And that leads to the unsettling question. If the system doesn't change to support the student, if we don't build the ramp, can we honestly, I mean, honestly, say that we're being inclusive? Or are we just being physically close?
Hey, that's the big question. Well, thank you to those for joining us on this deep dive into response to intervention, also known as RTI. We're your hosts, Jayda.
And I'm Boaz.
And this has been Before Stuff Hits the Fan.